I can wake him up." The words sliced through the stale hospital air like a match struck in darkness. Darius Cole jerked his head toward the doorway. A barefoot girl stood there, hoodie frayed at the sleeves, braids falling over thin shoulders. Her eyes, dark, steady, far older than her years, locked on his. "What did you just say?" His voice came out rough, cracked from nights without sleep. "I can wake him up," she repeated, quiet but sure, as if she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Inside the ICU, monitors blinked in steady rhythm, green light spilling across Miles's small frame. 8 years old, hooked to machines, a pale shadow under a blue blanket printed with faded rockets. Darius's fingers clung to the rail of the bed, knuckles white. He hadn't left that spot in 6 days. The girl stepped closer, leaving faint marks on the polished floor. A security guard started forward, but she raised one hand, calm, unafraid. "He's not gone," she said. "He's waiting for you to tell him the truth." Darius shook his head. "Who are you? You can't be in here." She ignored the warning sign flashing above the door, moved past the guard without a sound, and stopped at the foot of the bed. The smell of antiseptic, the quiet hiss of oxygen, the cold blue light pressing against glass walls, all of it closed in. Outside, a storm smudged the windows, rain streaking down like gray tears. "You don't understand," Darius said. "The doctors tried everything. A billionaire threw machines at him. Nothing worked." The girl tilted her head. "Machines don't know the song." His breath caught. "What song?" "The one his mama used to sing," she answered, eyes flicking to the boy. "The one you stopped singing." Darius's chest tightened. He'd buried that melody with his wife, sealed it behind guilt and long nights. The girl's gaze didn't waver. "He hears you, but he doesn't know if it's safe to come back. Give him a reason." Alarms pulsed once, a quick blip on the monitor. Darius froze, staring at the faint rise and fall of Miles's chest. The girl looked up at him. "Tell him you're still here." Rain hammered harder against the glass as Darius felt the room tilt, every regret rushing forward. Miles's fingers twitched, barely, but real. Miles lay still beneath the thin blue blanket, a tangle of wires tracing his chest, a breathing tube rising and falling with each fragile breath. The blanket's rockets were almost rubbed away, colors faded by too many washes, but Darius couldn't bring himself to change it. It was the last thing Miles had chosen himself, the morning before everything stopped. Darius sat hunched in a stiff vinyl chair, sleeves rolled, shirt wrinkled from nights of pacing the corridor. His beard was rough, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been just a week ago. He reached for Miles's hand, small and cool against his palm. The pulse fluttered, barely there. The room smelled of bleach and rain-soaked coats, a mix that clung to the back of his throat. Down the hall, a gospel hum floated faintly from a nurse's phone speaker, the kind of tune Darius's grandmother used to play on Sundays after church. He let the sound drift in, but it couldn't quiet the storm inside him. He thought of Denise, his wife, gone 3 years now. He could still see her standing in the kitchen, twisting her ring as she laughed at something Miles had said. That morning was carved into him, Miles racing toy cars across the counter, Denise singing a lullaby from her own childhood, voice soft and sure. A few hours later she was gone, a crash on a wet highway. Darius buried the melody with her and turned off every light in their house that night. In the months after, he let his company run on autopilot. Stock meetings blurred together, contracts piled on his desk. Money couldn't fix a hole that deep. He stopped showing up, stopped answering calls, until the board eased him out quietly. None of it mattered next to the boy in this bed. He rubbed his temples, fighting the memory of the doctor's words. Genetic anomaly, negligible odds. Prepare yourself. Prepare for what? To walk out of here alone? A monitor gave a low beep, steadying again, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw Miles's eyelids tremble. He leaned forward, gripping the rail. "Miles? Son, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the soft hiss of oxygen. Outside the window, the city blurred under rain, streetlights glowing like candles through the downpour. Darius pressed his forehead to the glass, whispering a prayer his grandmother once taught him. "Lord, keep him covered." Behind him, Miles lay small, a boy caught between silence and the world waiting on the other side. Darius turned back, pulling the chair closer until his knees touched the frame of the bed. He rested a hand on Miles's chest, feeling the rise, the fall, and the stubborn rhythm still alive beneath the machines. The door swung open without a knock, and Lorraine Evans stepped inside, her Sunday hat still on though it was Friday night. She held a folded church fan in one hand, the kind printed with a picture of praying hands, and her eyes went straight to the boy in the bed. Her mouth tightened before she turned on Darius. "You still sitting here, looking pitiful," she said, voice sharp as the edge of her heels on the floor. "I warned you, Darius Cole. God don't bless a man who keeps running from him." Darius rose halfway from the chair, exhausted but braced for impact. "Mrs. Evans, please, don't do this now." She marched closer, setting the fan on the tray table with a thump. "You think I don't see what's happening? My daughter's gone, and now this child lying here because you never listened. You were out chasing deals when you should have been covering your family in prayer." He looked at Miles, then back at her, throat tight. "I love Denise. I love Miles. I've done everything I know to keep him safe." Lorraine shook her head, pearls clicking against her collarbone. "Love ain't just words, son. Love is standing where storms hit, not hiding behind money. All that wealth and not a lick of faith left in you." "I stayed," Darius said, voice low but steady. 6 days right here. I haven't eaten. I haven't closed my eyes. Don't tell me I don't care." "You care when it's too late." She leaned over Miles, smoothing the blanket with a trembling palm. Her eyes softened a moment at the sight of her grandson's face, then hardened again. "This is a warning, Darius. The Lord took Denise home. He might be calling this boy too. Sometimes he has to break a man to make him see." He stepped forward, blocking her view of the bed. "Don't speak that over him. He's fighting." "Fighting?" Lorraine's voice rose, carrying down the hall. A nurse paused outside the door. "Fighting against what's already written? I've been around long enough to know when a soul's halfway gone." Darius caught her wrist gently, guiding her back from the machines. "Please, not here, not in front of him." Lorraine pulled free, staring him down. "You still don't get it. Miles needs a father who will stand up, confess, and call on heaven, not one who hides behind guilt." She picked up her fan, snapping it open with a loud crack. "If you don't find your voice, that child may never hear you." Her words hung heavy, mingling with the slow beep of the monitors. She left the room without another glance, heels clicking against the tile, leaving Darius gripping the rail at Miles's side, the weight of her judgment pressing harder than the storm outside. Dr. Simone Carter entered quietly, a tablet tucked against her chest. The rain still beat against the window, but the storm inside the room was louder. Darius straightened, sensing news before she spoke. Lorraine, who had returned to sit stiffly near the foot of the bed, folded her hands across her lap. Simone drew a steady breath. "Mr. Cole, we got the genetic panel back." She glanced at Miles, then back to Darius. "There's something we didn't see at first. A rare mutation. Same marker your wife carried. It's extremely aggressive. Very little research exists." Darius's hands gripped the rail, knuckles pale against dark skin. "What are you saying?" "It explains why he crashed so suddenly," Simone continued, voice calm but edged with heaviness. "There's no approved treatment. We can manage symptoms, keep him comfortable, but the odds of full neurological recovery—" She hesitated, choosing words like glass. "They're close to zero." Lorraine's breath hissed through her teeth. "I knew this was judgment," she muttered, clutching her church fan tighter. Simone shook her head firmly. "No, ma'am. This isn't punishment. It's biology. A cruel one, but still biology." She turned back to Darius. "Given the prognosis, hospital policy says we have to discuss next steps, including whether you want to continue life support." The words landed like stones. Darius sat down hard, the vinyl chair squeaking under his weight. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The image of Denise flashed, her laugh in the kitchen, the lullaby drifting through morning light. He saw her face again in the casket, Miles holding his hand at the funeral, asking when Mama would wake up. He forced himself to look at his boy. Miles lay quiet, lashes resting on pale cheeks, chest rising with the rhythm of a machine. The IV hissed softly, a metronome counting down. "No," Darius said at last, low but sharp. "Don't ask me to let him go." Simone crouched beside the chair, eyes level with his. "I understand how hard this is, but I owe you the truth. We don't want to prolong suffering." "He's my son," Darius snapped, then softened, voice breaking. "He's all I have left." Lorraine sighed, eyes wet but hard. "Darius, sometimes mercy means release. Don't let pride keep you from hearing God." Darius turned toward her, jaw tight. "This isn't about pride. I won't bury him while there's breath in his body." The room went still except for the rain and the soft blip of the monitors. Simone placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We'll support whatever decision you make," she said quietly. "But we need to know soon." She left them with paperwork on the counter, pages heavy with finality. Lorraine looked away, lips moving in silent prayer. Darius remained seated, head bowed, one hand clutching Miles's, refusing to let go even as the future closed in. The door swung open again, this time with a sweep of polished shoes and camera lenses. Langston Ray strode in first, a tall man in an immaculate charcoal suit, cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. Behind him came two assistants with tablets and a videographer already raising his rig. Their umbrellas dripped rainwater onto the tile. "Mr. Cole," Langston said, voice smooth as a broadcast anchor. "I heard about your boy. I'm sorry for the pain you're carrying." He offered a firm handshake, but Darius stayed planted beside the bed, hand still wrapped around Miles's. Langston scanned the monitors, eyes sharp, calculating. "I built an entire division at Raytech for cases like this. AI-driven diagnostics, neuromapping, adaptive treatment protocols. We've saved children," doctors wrote off. Darius frowned. "And you brought a camera crew?" Langston flashed a quick smile toward the lens. "Transparency builds hope. People need to see solutions." Lorraine stiffened in her chair, muttering, "Hope don't come with microphones." Langston ignored her and stepped closer to the bed. "Give me permission and I can roll in equipment tonight. We'll map every synapse, reboot what's shut down. Miles deserves the very best technology." Darius studied him, wary. "Why?" Something flickered across Langston's polished facade. He motioned his team out into the hall, closed the door, and lowered his voice. 3 years ago, my little girl, Ariel, collapsed during recess. Same rapid decline, same gene sequence your doctor mentioned. I flew in experts from Tokyo, Zurich, anywhere that would take my calls." He glanced at Miles, then back at Darius, his expression raw for the first time. "Nothing worked. She was gone in 48 hours. The room tightened around them. Rain clung to the glass, framing Langston's reflection beside Miles's still body. I swore if another child came along with the same mutation, I wouldn't stand by," Langston continued. "I invested millions to build an AI that could outthink every specialist. We call it Phoenix. It's still in testing, but this is the closest we've come to a real fight against that gene." Darius looked from Langston to the boy, then to Lorraine, who sat clutching her fan. "You want to experiment on him," Darius said quietly. Langston shook his head. "I want to give him a chance my daughter didn't have. I can't promise a cure, but I can promise we'll use everything I've built." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Man's talking redemption for himself, not this child." Langston didn't flinch. "Maybe," he admitted, voice low. "But sometimes redemption and rescue walk the same road." The steady beep of the monitors filled the silence. Darius rubbed a hand over his face, torn between desperation and caution. Langston set a business card on the table, heavy paper stamped with a gold emblem. "Say the word, and I'll move mountains tonight." He left the card there, waiting, while rain streaked down the window like ink on an unwritten page. The ICU corridor had settled into its midnight hush when a soft knock rapped against the glass. A security guard leaned in, lowering his voice. "Mr. Cole, there's a kid downstairs asking for you. Says it's important." Darius blinked, half rising from the chair he'd barely left in days. Lorraine stirred in the corner, tightening the shawl around her shoulders. "What kind of kid?" Darius asked. "Little girl," the guard said. "Barefoot, looks about 11. Says she's here for the boy." Lorraine frowned, crossing herself. "Lord, keep foolishness away from this room." Darius followed the guard through the quiet halls, past vending machines humming under flickering lights. Down in the lobby, rain streaked the glass doors, lightning sketching brief shadows across the floor. She sat on a bench near the entrance, knees drawn close, hoodie the color of washed-out charcoal clinging to thin arms. Her braids framed a face streaked with city dust, but her eyes, steady, luminous, belonged to someone who'd seen more than a child should. In one hand she held a scrap of paper, edges crumpled, words scrawled in blue ink like a melody interrupted mid-line. When she looked up, it felt as though the air shifted. "You're Darius Cole," she said, not a question. He hesitated. "And you are?" "Naomi." She stood, careful and calm despite bare feet on cold tile. "I came for Miles." "You can't be here," he said, glancing at the guard. "It's late. This is a hospital." "He's not gone," Naomi cut in, voice quiet but certain. "He's waiting for your truth." Darius stared at her, unsettled by how she spoke, how the storm behind her framed her like a silhouette. "What truth?" "The one you keep locked behind your guilt." She held out the paper. The writing looked like lyrics, a few bars of a song. His chest tightened. Denise's lullaby, the one she used to sing over pancake breakfasts and car rides home from church choir rehearsals. He hadn't heard those words in years. Naomi stepped closer, the rain dripping from her braids onto the lobby floor. "He can hear pieces of you, but not the part that tells him he's safe." Lorraine had followed them down, clutching her fan as though it might ward off spirits. "Darius, don't let that child fill your head," she warned. "This is grief playing tricks." But Naomi's gaze didn't leave his. "I don't play," she said softly. "Miles is calling, but he won't come back until you call him home." The guard shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them. Darius felt the paper trembling in his hand, the faint echo of a song rising from memory. He looked at Naomi again, something unspoken passing between them, as if she carried the weight of stories older than her own years. "Come with me," she said at last. "He doesn't have much time." Naomi stood at the foot of the bed, rainwater still clinging to the cuffs of her faded hoodie. She moved with quiet purpose, slipping past the tangle of monitors until she was beside Miles. Darius watched her every step, heart thudding against his ribs. Lorraine sat stiff in the corner, lips pressed thin, fingers wrapped around the handle of her church fan. Naomi reached out and laid a small hand on Miles's forehead. Her touch was light, almost reverent, like someone blessing a newborn in church. "He's close," she said, eyes never leaving the boy's face. "But he doesn't know if you want him to stay." Darius felt the air tighten. "What do you mean?" "You've been holding something," Naomi replied. "He feels it even in the dark. Tell him what you hid." Darius's throat closed. He glanced at Lorraine, who shook her head. "Don't encourage this nonsense," she warned. But Naomi's gaze was steady, unbothered. "Words can heal," she said, "but only if they're the ones you're afraid of." The room seemed smaller, lights humming above them. Darius looked at his son, skin pale against the blue blanket, chest moving only because of the machine. He remembered the morning before Denise died, how Miles had begged for pancakes. Darius had waved him off, late for a meeting he didn't even want. Denise had kissed their boy on the forehead, humming the same lullaby written on the paper now lying on the tray. His voice cracked. "Miles, I wasn't there." He pressed his hands against the bed rail. "That morning, I left too fast. I missed breakfast. I missed your smile." Naomi didn't speak, only nodded for him to keep going. "I thought I had more time," Darius whispered. "I thought we could make it up later. But later never came, and now you're here, and I'm begging for another chance." His tears darkened the fabric near Miles's hand. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The monitors hummed with their usual rhythm. Then a single sharp chirp cut through the room. The heart line jumped once, then steadied higher than before. Darius froze. "Did you see that?" Lorraine gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. Naomi's expression didn't change, but there was quiet warmth in her eyes. "He heard you." The beeping quickened again, faint, but undeniable. Darius grabbed his son's small fingers. "Miles, Daddy's here. I'm not leaving." Naomi stepped back, letting the moment hold. Rain pressed against the windows, but inside the room something lighter had begun to stir. Even Lorraine, still clutching her fan, let her shoulders soften as she looked from the monitors to her grandson's face. Darius leaned closer, forehead almost touching Miles's. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered. "I should have stayed. I should have sung that song with you every day." Miles's eyelids trembled just enough to steal Darius's breath. Naomi smiled faintly, folding her hands behind her back. "Keep talking," she said. "He's finding his way." Morning crept through the blinds, pale light washing over the room. Darius had dozed for only minutes in the chair, one hand still wrapped around Miles's. He jerked awake at the sound of a cart rolling past in the hall. The space beside the bed was empty. No small figure in a gray hoodie. No paper in her hand. He rose quickly, scanning the corners. "Naomi?" His voice echoed off the sterile walls. Only the steady hiss of oxygen answered. Lorraine straightened from her seat near the window, smoothing the wrinkles from her skirt. "Who are you calling?" she asked, one brow lifted. "The girl from last night," Darius said. "She was standing right here, touching his forehead." Lorraine clicked her tongue and shook her head. "That wasn't the Lord's doing, Darius. That was your exhaustion talking. You've been up near a week, seeing shadows." Before he could respond, "Doctor." Simone entered with a tablet under her arm. She checked the monitors, brows knitting together. "His vitals improved overnight," she said. "Heart rate steadier, brain activity up almost 20%. Darius's hope flickered. "That's good, right?" "It's remarkable," Simone admitted, scrolling through data. "But I can't explain it. Nothing in his medication profile accounts for this jump." Lorraine folded her arms. "You hear that? Even the doctor says it doesn't make sense. That little street child didn't come in here and work a miracle. You dreamed her up." "No," Darius said firmly. "She was real. She knew about the song, about things no one could have told her." Simone looked up from the screen. "What girl?" Darius told her about Naomi. The paper, the way she spoke, how Miles's heart line spiked after he confessed. Simone tapped the tablet, curiosity sparking behind professional calm. "I'll check security footage," she said. Minutes later, she returned with a frown. "Nothing," she said quietly. "Lobby cameras, hallway feeds, even the one outside this room. No sign of a child after midnight." Lorraine gave a small, satisfied nod. "See? The mind plays tricks when grief won't let you rest." Darius paced to the window, pressing his palms against the cool glass. Below, the city gleamed after rain, people hurrying along sidewalks. He could almost see Naomi sitting there on the bench again, steady as stone. "She was here," he murmured. "I felt her hand. She told me to speak." Simone studied him, then Miles. "Whatever happened," she said, "something reached him. His numbers don't lie." She placed a hand on Darius's shoulder, steady but unsure. "Maybe focus on what's working instead of proving who was in the room." Lorraine's voice softened just enough to carry a hint of care. "Son, hold fast to prayer. Leave ghosts out of it." But Darius only looked back at his boy, heartbeat loud in his ears. Certain Naomi's absence meant more than tired eyes could explain. Langston stood behind the glass of the observation room, hands buried in the pockets of his tailored coat. Beyond the pane, Miles lay small and still beneath a web of wires, the monitors pulsing green against the dark. Darius hovered near the bed, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the boy as if sheer will might pull him back. Langston cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole," he said, voice softer than the one he'd used when he first stormed in with his crew. "Can I have a word?" Darius followed him into the narrow space, the hum of machines muffled once the door clicked shut. For a moment, neither man spoke. Langston stared at the boy through the glass, jaw tight, then reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small photo. It showed a little girl with springy curls and a wide grin, holding a jump rope on a sunlit sidewalk. "Ariel," Langston murmured. 7 years old? Brightest thing I ever knew." He tapped the edge of the picture against his palm. "She collapsed on the playground. No warning. Same gene your doctor mentioned." Darius glanced at the photo, then back at Langston's face. Beneath the polish and press releases, grief had carved lines deep into the man's eyes. "I threw everything I had at saving her," Langston continued. "Private jets, top neurologists, machines worth more than houses. I even brought in a choir to sing, thinking maybe sound could wake her brain. Nothing mattered." His voice caught, then steadied. 48 hours after she fell, they covered her with a sheet. Darius felt the ache in his own chest mirror the one in Langston's words. Langston placed the photo gently on the sill. "After that, I built Phoenix. It's a learning system, built to find patterns we can't. Some call it ego, others obsession. But the truth?" He looked at Darius, eyes stripped of their armor. "I'm not just trying to save Miles. I'm trying to save myself from the night I couldn't save her." Silence pressed in. Down the hall, a nurse hummed an old gospel tune under her breath, the notes threading through the tension like a memory from Sunday mornings long ago. Darius shifted, gaze flicking between the boy, the picture, and the man beside him. "You think that machine can give you absolution?" Langston gave a small, bitter laugh. "Absolution's above my pay grade." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "But if I can give this child a chance, maybe I stop waking up at 3 a.m. hearing her call my name." For a long moment they stood side by side, two fathers separated by wealth, but joined by the same wound. The rain had slowed, leaving the window streaked with silver trails. Darius finally spoke, voice low but steady. "If we try this, it's not for your redemption. It's for him." He nodded toward Miles, lying beneath the steady glow of machines. "Promise me you won't turn my boy into a headline." Langston met his gaze and nodded. "No cameras," he said quietly. "Just work." Outside, a faint tremor ran through Miles's fingers, almost too small to notice. Both men caught it, eyes meeting again over the fragile proof of life between them. Neither spoke, but the unspoken vow hung there. They would fight, together, for as long as the boy's heart kept beating. The hallway lights flickered as midnight settled over the ward. Darius sat slumped by Miles's bed, exhaustion heavy in his bones. Lorraine had dozed off in a corner chair, her church fan resting across her lap. The monitors glowed faint green, steady, but distant, like stars too far away to touch. A soft knock tapped against the glass. Darius turned sharply. Naomi stood there, rain dripping from the ends of her braids, hoodie darker from the storm. In her hand was the same crumpled sheet of paper, now smoothed flat. She slipped inside without a sound, eyes fixed on Miles. "You came back," Darius whispered, standing. Naomi nodded. "He's waiting." She held out the paper. "You left the song unfinished." Darius stared at the lines written in shaky blue ink. They were fragments of the lullaby Denise used to sing, soft gospel phrases about light in the shadows, stars after rain. He hadn't dared speak those words aloud since the night of the crash. "I can't," he said, voice rough. "Not here." Naomi's gaze stayed steady, steady in a way that made the air feel thick. "That's what keeps him between worlds," she said quietly. "He needs to hear you call him home." Lorraine stirred, blinking awake. She frowned at the girl. "More tricks," she muttered, clutching her fan. "Songs won't fix a sickness written in his blood." Naomi turned to her, calm but firm. "Songs can tell a soul where to stand." Then she looked back at Darius. You're the only one he'll follow." Darius felt his throat tighten. He reached for the paper, fingers trembling as he traced the words Denise had once hummed while braiding Miles's hair before Sunday service. He remembered her laughing when the boy tried to sing along, voice high and sweet. He sank to the edge of the bed. Miles's hand lay open, pale against the blanket. Darius laced his fingers through the small palm, then drew a breath that felt like lifting a mountain. His first note came out thin, nearly breaking. He paused, eyes on his son, then tried again. The melody crept into the room, quiet but clear, carrying the weight of every day he'd stayed silent. "There's light in the shadows, and stars in the rain." Naomi closed her eyes, swaying slightly, as if keeping rhythm with something only she could hear. Lorraine's fan stilled on her lap. Darius kept going, voice gaining strength even as tears blurred his sight. "Hold on, little dreamer. You'll fly once again." For a moment the machine stayed steady, unchanged. Then the heart monitor gave a sharp chirp, and Miles's fingers twitched against Darius's palm. Darius gasped, clutching the hand tighter. "Miles? Son?" Another faint movement answered, small, but unmistakable. Naomi smiled faintly. The kind of smile born of knowing. "He's listening," she said. "Don't stop now." Darius lifted his face, grief and hope colliding in his chest, and sang the line again, letting every syllable carry the promise he'd buried too long. The room felt different, alive with something that couldn't be charted on paper, something that asked him to keep singing until the boy found his way back. Lorraine stood by the counter, the hospital consent form spread open beneath her hands. The morning sun leaked through the blinds, catching the silver in her hair. She traced the line where a signature would go, lips pressed tight. Miles lay still across the room, the lullaby's echo fading into the steady hiss of the ventilator. Darius sensed the shift before she spoke. "It's time," Lorraine said quietly. "I can't watch him linger like this. The doctors have done their part, and the Lord will do the rest. We shouldn't hold him hostage between here and heaven." Darius rose from the chair, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "No." She turned, eyes stern but wet at the corners. "Son, I've buried a daughter. I know what it means to let go. Mercy isn't weakness." He shook his head, moving toward her. "This isn't mercy. This is quitting before the fight's over." Lorraine's fingers tightened around the pen. "I saw how tired you are, how you're clinging to every twitch like it's a sign. But grief will make you see miracles where there are none." "It wasn't grief," Darius shot back. "I wasn't alone last night." Lorraine frowned, searching his face. "That child again?" "Yes, Naomi." He pointed toward the bed, voice rising. "She came here, handed me Denise's song, told me to sing. And I did, Mama Lorraine." Miles moved. His fingers curled around mine. Lorraine hesitated, knuckles whitening on the pen. "Even if she was real, she's no prophet. Children wander these halls all the time. You can't stake your boy's life on a stranger's story." Darius stepped closer, blocking her view of the paper. "She wasn't just wandering. She knew things no one else could know. That girl was sent." Lorraine's brows drew together, years of church pew discipline fighting the tremor in her voice. "You think the Lord put some barefoot child in this hospital to do what doctors can't?" "I think God used whoever would listen," Darius said, steady now. "And I think he's asking me not to give up." The monitors kept their quiet rhythm, as if waiting for an answer. Lorraine looked from Darius to the boy, then back to the form. Her shoulders sagged under a weight heavier than age. "You're chasing hope that could break you," she whispered. "Hope's all we've got," Darius replied. "If I sign that paper, Miles never knows I stayed." He reached out and gently slid the pen from her grasp, setting it aside. "I'm not done with my son," he said, voice low but resolute. "And neither is God." Lorraine closed her eyes, hands trembling at her sides. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she folded the form, tucking it back into the folder with a quiet sigh. "Then you better stand tall," she murmured. "Because if you're wrong, it'll tear you apart." Darius nodded once, returning to Miles's side. He wrapped his fingers around the boy's hand, refusing to let darkness write the last line. Darius stepped out into the drizzle, clutching the damp scrap of Naomi's handwriting. The sky was low and gray, pressing against the city's brick shoulders. Inside the hospital, Miles lay where Darius had left him, but the girl who'd brought hope was gone again, vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared. He couldn't sit still. He headed for the streets, guided by fragments of stories from night shift nurses who'd seen a small figure slipping out before dawn. His first stop was a soup kitchen on Ashford Avenue, a place where Denise once volunteered. Inside, the scent of collard greens and cornbread filled the air. A few elders gathered around a chipped table, warming hands on styrofoam cups. "Y'all ever see a girl about 11? Darius asked, voice hoarse. "Braids, gray hoodie, comes around humming?" An older woman looked up from her coffee. "That child been drifting through here off and on," she said. "Don't ask her name, just sings to the little ones waiting with their mamas, calms them right down." She shook her head. "Thought she was one of them foster kids nobody claimed." Darius thanked her and hurried on, rain soaking through his jacket. His next lead was a rundown community hall that used to host a gospel choir. The double doors hung crooked, paint peeling, but inside he found a man tuning an old upright piano. "Sir," Darius said, breathless, "have you seen a young girl?" The man cut him off with a chuckle. "You looking for the songbird?" "Yeah, I've seen her. She slips in during rehearsals, sings soft as air, then disappears before we can thank her." He tapped the piano lid. "She's got an old soul, that one. Carries sorrow in her eyes, but sings like she's stitching wounds." By late afternoon, Darius reached the bus terminal on Market Street. A few travelers huddled beneath the awning, waiting for the evening routes. A gray-haired security guard leaned against a moat, radio clipped to his belt. "You looking lost, friend?" the guard said. "I'm searching for a girl," Darius replied, holding out the paper Naomi had given him. "She handed me this in the hospital." The guard squinted. "She been here too. Sits on bench 7, right where the heaters blow. Sometimes sings to babies fussing in strollers. Folks call her Little Psalm. Always leaves before anyone can offer her a ride." The nickname caught Darius off guard, stirring a memory of his grandmother reading the Psalms aloud on porch evenings, telling him every name meant something in heaven. He pocketed the paper carefully. Back at the hospital, rain turned to mist, wrapping the skyline in silver. Darius stood on the curb, unsure if he'd found answers or more mystery. Every witness spoke of the same girl, always singing, always slipping away. He looked toward Miles's window high above, a quiet vow forming inside him. Wherever Naomi was, he'd find her again, and bring that song back to the boy waiting in the dark. The 7th night settled heavy over the ICU, clouds pressing low against the windows. Inside, Miles lay pale beneath the thin blanket, machines whispering around him. Darius sat close, humming fragments of the lullaby under his breath, fighting the fatigue dragging at his eyelids. Lorraine stood at the foot of the bed, fingers locked around her fan as if prayer alone could keep the room steady. Without warning, the monitor spiked, then screamed. Miles's body jerked, small limbs stiffening against the rails. The ventilator hissed, lights flaring red across the screen. Darius leapt to his feet, heart pounding. "Miles!" Dr. Simone rushed in with 2 nurses, snapping orders. "Get the crash cart, he's seizing." One nurse reached to hold the boy's head. "Son," while another adjusted the IV. Lorraine cried out, clutching the rail for balance. "Lord Jesus, cover him!" she shouted, tears streaking down her cheeks. Darius hovered at the edge of the chaos, desperate and useless. The lullaby died in his throat, replaced by a raw plea. "Don't take him, please, not now." Simone checked the readings, her calm voice tight with urgency. "Heart rate's dropping, O2 falling fast. If we don't stabilize, we'll lose him." The room blurred, a swirl of uniforms and wires. Darius pressed his palms to his face, then looked toward the door, and froze. Naomi stood beyond the glass, rainwater dripping from her hoodie, eyes fixed on the boy. She didn't enter, only shook her head slowly, lips parting just enough for words to reach him through the barrier. "Finish the song." Darius felt the command settle like fire in his chest. He pushed past a nurse, gripping the side rail. "Move," he said hoarsely. "Let me get to him." Simone hesitated, then stepped aside. Darius leaned over the bed, catching Miles's trembling hand. The boy's skin was cold, muscles quivering against the convulsions. He drew in a ragged breath. "There's light in the shadows." His voice cracked, but he forced it out louder, clear enough to rise above alarms. "And stars in the rain." Miles's spasms slowed, just a fraction, but enough for Simone to glance at the screen. "Heart rate stabilizing, keep going," she urged. Lorraine pressed both hands to her mouth, tears falling freely. "Sing, Darius," she whispered. "Sing over my baby." Darius sang again, each word carving through fear. "Hold on, little dreamer. You'll fly once again." The shaking eased more. The monitor's frantic beep softened into an uncertain rhythm. Naomi's figure beyond the glass lifted her chin, eyes steady, as though anchoring them all. Darius bent closer, forehead nearly touching Miles's. "Daddy's right here, son. You're not alone." For one breathless moment, everything held. The rain, the lights, the people frozen mid-action. Then the heart monitor steadied, tracing a fragile but undeniable line across the screen. Simone exhaled, lowering the syringe in her hand. Lorraine sobbed into her shawl, whispering praise through trembling lips. Darius looked up, searching for the girl at the window, but the hallway was empty, only wet footprints fading into the dark. Darius gripped the side rail, knuckles white, the last echoes of alarms fading into a low, steady hum. Miles lay trembling, a sheen of sweat on his small forehead. Lorraine knelt at the foot of the bed, whispering prayers between sobs. Dr. Simone kept a hand on the boy's shoulder, eyes flicking between the screen and the man standing over him. Darius looked once more toward the window. The hallway beyond was empty, but he could still feel Naomi's words hanging in the air. "Finish the song." He drew in a long breath, tasting salt and metal. His grandmother's voice seemed to rise from somewhere deep, layered with Denise's laughter and the soft hum she used to weave through the kitchen while flipping cornbread. The melody came back whole, each line waiting to be spoken into the room. He began low, rough from fear. "There's light in the shadows." The sound trembled, then steadied. "And stars in the rain." Lorraine looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, and joined quietly, humming the harmony she'd learned in church pews long before Denise was born. Simone didn't move, only watched as the monitor's frantic blips softened, syncing with the rhythm of the song. Darius's voice grew stronger, climbing over the hiss of the ventilator. "Hold on, little dreamer. You'll fly once again." He leaned closer, letting the words fall straight into his son's ear. Miles twitched, a quick jolt that ran through his limbs. Darius paused for half a heartbeat, then pressed on, singing the verse Denise had written on the back of a church bulletin years ago. "Even when night steals the sky, even when tears blur the dawn, there's a hand reaching through. It's been holding you all along." The words filled the room, weaving through the soft gospel Lorraine was humming, rising above the machines. It felt less like a song and more like a bridge thrown across a chasm, every note laid down for Miles to follow. Another tremor shook the boy's body, then settled into stillness. The monitors caught it first, a jump in the heart line, firm and steady. Simone's breath caught. "He's responding," she whispered. Darius kept singing, voice steady now, letting the final refrain pour out with everything he had left. "So rest, little dreamer. Let courage remain. There's light in the shadows, and stars in the rain." Miles's lashes fluttered, faint but deliberate. Darius bent lower, forehead nearly touching his son's. "Come on, Miles," he whispered. "Come back to me." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the boy's fingers curled, just slightly, against Darius's palm. Lorraine gasped, covering her mouth. Simone's eyes widened, her hands hovering just above the boy, as if afraid to break the fragile spell. The last note lingered in the air, soft and warm, settling over the room like a promise. The machines were still there, steady and quiet now, but it was the rhythm beneath them, the pulse of a child choosing to stay, that held every heart captive. The room felt caught between silence and heartbeat, a stillness so complete it pressed against Darius's ears. The last note of the lullaby drifted away, leaving only the steady sigh of the ventilator and the faint rhythm of Miles's heart. Lorraine stood frozen beside the bed, both hands clasped to her chest. Dr. Simone hovered near the monitors, eyes wide, afraid to speak and shatter the fragile calm. Darius leaned closer, fingers wrapped tight around his son's. "I'm right here, Miles," he whispered. "Daddy's not letting go." He searched the boy's face, willing movement, anything to prove that the song had found him. A tremor passed across Miles's eyelids, delicate as a ripple over water. Darius caught his breath. "That's it, baby. Come on." The lashes quivered again, then slowly lifted. Two dark eyes blinked up at the light, hazy but alive. Darius felt his knees threaten to give way. He pressed his forehead to the bed rail, tears slipping free before he could stop them. Miles's lips parted, dry and pale. For a second, no sound came. Then a faint whisper broke free, the words sliding out like they'd been waiting all along. "After the rain comes the morning." Darius froze. That line, he'd never sung it, not once. Denise had written it in the margin of her hymn book, but hadn't lived long enough to teach it to their boy. Lorraine gasped, backing a step as if she'd seen something holy. "That was her verse," she murmured. "Lord have mercy, that was Denise's verse." Simone's eyes shone as she leaned in to check Miles's vitals. "Neurological response is strong," she said softly. "He's with us." Darius bent low, cupping his son's face in trembling hands. "Miles, can you see me?" The boy blinked again, eyes focusing inch by inch. "Daddy," he breathed. A sob broke loose from Darius's chest. He gathered the child against him carefully, mindful of the lines still taped to small arms. "I've got you, son. I've been right here." Miles clung weakly, his tiny fingers curling against the fabric of Darius's shirt. He looked toward Lorraine, recognition flickering in his tired eyes. She moved to the bedside, tears streaking her face, and brushed a palm over his hair. "Grandma's here, baby," she said, voice quaking. "You're safe." The monitors hummed steady, a quiet chorus behind the reunion. Darius kissed the boy's forehead, rocking gently as if Miles were small again, the way he used to after bedtime prayers. From the corner, Simone lowered her clipboard, letting the moment breathe. She caught Darius's eye and gave a slight nod, an unspoken permission to stay in this grace a little longer. Miles stirred, voice barely audible. "Did you hear the girl singing?" Darius stilled, heart racing. "Naomi?" Miles gave a tiny nod. "She said you had to finish the song, so I could find you." Lorraine crossed herself, whispering thanks. Darius looked toward the hallway through the narrow window in the door. Empty. No footprints, no shadow. Only the faint reflection of his own face holding his son. He turned back to Miles, brushing damp curls from his forehead. "We finished it together," he said, steady now. "And you came back." Miles's eyes drifted shut for a moment, then reopened, clearer than before. "After the rain," he repeated softly, "comes the morning." The words settled over them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Lorraine sank to her knees beside the bed, shoulders shaking in quiet praise. Simone wiped her eyes, pretending it was just a long shift. Darius stayed wrapped around his son, breathing in the warmth of a life returned. The storm outside had spent itself, leaving the city slick and shining. And inside that room, hope felt solid enough to hold. The corridor outside Miles's room was hushed, washed in a soft amber glow from the night shift lamps. Nurses moved quietly at their stations, shoes whispering across polished linoleum. Darius stepped out for air, one hand still damp from holding his son. He leaned against the wall, trying to steady the rush of everything that had just happened inside. At the far end of the hallway, a small figure waited near the window where rainwater streaked the glass. Naomi stood barefoot, hoodie sleeves hanging past her wrists. She smiled when she saw him, the same calm smile that had anchored him through the storm. "You stayed," she said, voice low but certain. Darius pushed away from the wall, walking toward her. "You knew he was coming back," he said. Naomi tilted her head, braids brushing her shoulders. "He doesn't need me now," she replied, as if explaining something simple. "You finished what his mama started. He heard you." Darius searched her face, wanting to ask 100 questions, where she'd come from, how she knew the song, why she'd chosen them. But all that came out was, "Will I see you again?" Naomi's eyes softened. Maybe someone else will." She glanced back toward the room, where faint laughter was starting to rise. Miles asking for water, Lorraine fussing with his blanket. "That's where you stay now," she said gently. "Inside those voices. Not in the dark." He nodded, words caught in his throat. "Thank you," he managed. Naomi smiled again, small and bright, then stepped toward the exit at the far end of the hall. For a heartbeat she was there, framed by the light spilling from the emergency sign. Then she was gone, as if the hallway had swallowed her whole. Startled, Darius hurried forward. The automatic doors at the end were still shut, red sensor lights steady. No squeak of rubber, no click of hinges. Only quiet. A security guard rounded the corner with a clipboard. "Evening, sir," he said. "Did you see a little girl leave just now?" Darius asked, scanning the empty space behind him. "Braids, gray hoodie?" The guard looked puzzled. "No one's come through," he said. He pointed to a monitor mounted above the desk. The screen showed the corridor from 2 angles, still and empty except for Darius standing alone. He stepped back, staring at the footage. Naomi wasn't there. Behind him, the soft sound of Miles's laughter floated from the room, bright and whole. Lorraine's voice followed, warm with praise, like the Sunday mornings she used to fill with hymns. Darius turned slowly from the monitor, letting the quiet settle. He felt no fear, only a strange, solid peace. He walked back toward the room, pausing once to glance at the window where Naomi had stood. The glass reflected only the city lights and his own figure, heavier but steadier than when the night began. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, back to the boy who had chosen to stay, carrying with him the memory of a girl who had shown them how to find the way home. 3 months later, the morning sun spilled over a quiet corner of the city where an old brick warehouse had been reborn. Its new sign gleamed in hand-painted gold, "Voices at Dawn." Inside, fresh paint brightened once cracked walls, and instruments lined shelves where rusted pipes used to hang. Children's laughter floated through the air, mingling with the scent of coffee and warm biscuits from the front table. Darius stood near the entrance, sleeves rolled, helping a boy adjust the strap on a second-hand guitar. He'd sold the last of his real estate holdings and a vintage car Denise once loved to fund the center. Every penny felt worth it. This place was alive, humming with songs that had once saved a single life and were now set free to save more. Lorraine arrived early, arms full of folded choir robes donated by her church. She moved slower these days, but her eyes carried new light. "Don't let these kids wrinkle my robes," she teased, placing them on a table before smoothing a stubborn crease. Then she turned serious, gazing at the room filled with children tuning violins, humming warm-up scales, painting lyrics across blank canvases. "Denise would have loved this," she said softly. Darius smiled, adjusting a drum beside a shy little girl. "That's the point," he said. "Miles and I aren't keeping the song to ourselves." Across the room, Miles sat cross-legged on a rug, laughing as a volunteer showed him how to pluck a bass string. He was thinner than before, but full of color, eyes bright with the same spark that had flickered awake in that hospital room. Every so often, he'd hum a bar from the lullaby, a secret reminder of the road he'd traveled back. A quiet figure slipped through the back door, leaving an envelope on Darius's desk before disappearing without a word. Inside was a check written in precise script, signed only with the initials L.R. Darius didn't need to ask. Langston Ray had chosen to keep his help quiet. He'd visited once after Miles woke, standing awkwardly by the bed, admitting he wanted to back the center, but not be seen. "This is about the kids," Langston had said. "Not about me." Lorraine caught sight of the envelope and smiled knowingly. "Some folks don't need their names on the hymn sheet," she murmured. Darius walked to the front of the room and clapped twice. The children hushed, expectant. "Welcome to the first official day of Voices at Dawn," he said, voice ringing against brick and glass. "This is a place where every voice matters, where music helps you find what fear tried to steal." He glanced at Miles, who gave a small, proud nod. "Some of you have stories that feel too heavy," Darius continued. "Here, we carry them together, and we turn them into songs." A volunteer began strumming a gentle chord. Lorraine gathered a few kids into a circle, teaching them a clap rhythm from an old gospel standard. Miles stood, shy at first, then sang the first line of the lullaby Naomi had returned to him. The others joined, voices weaving into something bright, fragile, and sudden all at once. Darius stepped back, letting the sound rise. Through the high windows, dawn stretched across the sky, scattering gold across the instruments and faces below. For a heartbeat, he thought he caught a shadow near the doorway, small and still, as if Naomi had come to hear what they were building. But when he looked again, only sunlight streamed through the glass, and the room pulsed with new life. Voices reclaiming the morning, just as one had reclaimed his son. One quiet evening, long after the last child had left the studio at Voices at Dawn, Darius set up an old microphone in the center of the room. Miles sat cross-legged on a rug, his guitar balanced across his knees. The boy's eyes held the steady glow of someone who had crossed a river and come back with stories. "You ready?" Darius asked, checking the cable. Miles nodded, fingers brushing the strings. "If we're doing this," he said, "let's call it Naomi's Echo. She's the reason we're here." Darius smiled, pride welling in his chest. "Naomi's Echo it is." They began to play. Darius's voice slid into the melody, rich and sure now, no trace of the raw fear that once cracked every syllable. Miles followed with a softer harmony, his young voice weaving around his father's like a ribbon. They sang the entire lullaby, including the verse Denise had written, the one Miles had spoken through half-closed eyes the night he woke. When they finished, the room felt full of something warm, like a gathering of every soul who'd carried them to this moment. Darius hit stop on the recorder, and together they listened back. The track held more than sound. It carried a heartbeat, a promise, the memory of a girl who'd appeared when hope was almost gone. They uploaded the recording to a brand new channel called Naomi's Echo, adding a simple description, for anyone fighting their way back to the light. The first comments arrived within hours. A nurse from Detroit wrote, "I played this for a boy in our ICU tonight. He calmed for the first time all week." A man serving time in a Louisiana prison sent a message. "This song made me remember my mama's voice. Maybe I'm not finished yet." By morning, hundreds of messages poured in. Caregivers from pediatric wards, teachers in rough neighborhoods, grandmothers raising grandchildren, even a chaplain at a youth detention center. They spoke of rooms that felt less heavy, of children humming again, of men and women daring to hope in places where hope had been silent too long. Darius scrolled through the words with Miles perched on his lap. The boy grinned when he saw one message written in shaky handwriting scanned as a photo. "You sang what I couldn't. Thank you for bringing my son back to me." Lorraine stepped into the studio carrying a tray of sweet tea and biscuits. She glanced at the screen and shook her head, though her smile was tender. "Seems that girl's still working," she said, "even if nobody can see her." Miles strummed a quiet chord, eyes drifting toward the open door where dusk painted the hallway gold. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Darius wrapped an arm around him. "Maybe she doesn't have to," he said. "Every note carries her." Outside, the first stars cut through the fading light. The song they'd sung together spread far beyond the walls of the center. A bridge stretched across hospital rooms, prison blocks, foster homes, and quiet bedrooms where someone fought to stay alive. Naomi's echo wasn't just a channel now, it was a lifeline, proof that even the smallest voice could find its way through darkness, and teach others to do the same. A soft rain dusted the sidewalks as Darius and Miles walked home from an evening session at Voices at Dawn. Streetlights threw halos across wet pavement, and the city smelled of rain-soaked brick and roasted peanuts from a vendor closing up for the night. Miles clutched the small guitar case slung over his shoulder, careful not to let the strap slip. He had been humming the lullaby's refrain all the way down the block, the same notes that had once brought him back from the edge. They turned a corner and paused. Under the awning of a shuttered cafe, an older man sat on a milk crate, a harmonica resting in his weathered hands. His jacket was worn smooth at the elbows, and his shoes had long since lost their shine. A paperboard sign leaned against his boot, edges damp from the rain. In neat block letters it read, "You're not lost. You're just not finished yet." Miles stopped in his tracks, breath catching. "Dad?" he whispered. Darius followed his gaze to the sign. The words cut through the drizzle, familiar and heavy with meaning. He felt a prickle at the back of his neck, the same quiet weight he'd felt the night Naomi stood in the hall. The man lifted the harmonica and played a few slow, soulful bars. The melody floated into the rain, carrying echoes of old blues, Sunday gospel, and something else. Something that reminded Darius of a hospital room bathed in moonlight, of a voice that had guided them through darkness. Miles stepped closer, eyes wide. "That's her message," he said, wonder threading his voice. "She's still out there." The musician glanced up, smile creasing lines deep into his face. "Evening," he said. "Y'all out late?" Darius cleared his throat. "Where'd you get that saying?" he asked, nodding toward the sign. The man shrugged, setting the harmonica on his knee. "Heard it from a little girl years back," he replied. "She'd pass by this corner, sing a tune, leave words behind like breadcrumbs. Said folks needed reminding they weren't done yet." Miles looked at his father, eyes shining despite the mist. "Naomi," he whispered, as if naming her would break the spell. The man tilted his head. "That her name?" "She never said. Just smiled and told me to keep playing for the ones feeling lost." He picked up the harmonica again, letting another line ripple through the drizzle, notes bending like warm wind through an open church door. Darius crouched beside Miles, steadying the guitar strap on his son's shoulder. "She's still working," he said quietly. "Maybe not where we can see, but she's still moving." Miles nodded, a small grin spreading across his face. He lifted his guitar, plucking a gentle chord in time with the harmonica. For a moment the two sounds met, child and elder, rain and rhythm, spinning a thread between past and present. The man tipped his hat and returned to his song, eyes twinkling as if he knew more than he would say. Darius placed a bill in the small jar at the man's feet, a silent thank you for carrying the echo forward. As they walked on, the rain softened to mist. Miles looked back once, catching the glow of the sign beneath the cafe's awning. He squeezed his father's hand. "She's still out there," he repeated, voice quiet but sure. Darius nodded, pulling the boy closer as they turned toward home. The night felt lighter, the city alive with hidden guardians, and somewhere beyond the drizzle, a girl's song lingered. guiding them, reminding them, just as it always had. The rain had stopped by the time Darius and Miles reached their block. A quiet stillness stretched across the street, broken only by the soft clink of wind chimes from a neighbor's porch. They walked slowly, savoring the calm after everything that had brought them here, the nights of fear, the song, the girl who appeared just long enough to lead them through the storm. Inside their apartment, Miles set his guitar on the couch and curled against his father's side. Darius wrapped an arm around him, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of his son's hair. Through the window, a thin sliver of moon cut through drifting clouds. He thought about Naomi, about how she'd stepped into their lives without warning and disappeared just as quietly. Her footprints had already faded from the hallway, but her voice lingered everywhere, in Miles's laugh, in the chords still hanging in the studio at Voices at Dawn, in every message arriving from people who found courage through the lullaby. As Miles drifted toward sleep, Darius spoke softly, the words settling into the hush around them. "Miracles don't always come with thunder," he said. "Sometimes they wear a frayed hoodie and sing you home." The camera of memory pulled back, over the boy resting safe, over the father holding on, over the city where hidden kindness waited in alleyways and on quiet corners. A chain of voices stretched beyond their home. Nurses playing the song in dim hospital rooms, volunteers humming while feeding kids at shelters, men in halfway houses tapping out rhythms on tabletops, reminding themselves they weren't finished yet. Darius reached for the laptop on the table and cued the next video for Naomi's Echo. The title read, "For Anyone Fighting Their Way Back to the Light." He glanced at Miles, who stirred and murmured, "Play it, Dad." The opening notes filled the room, rich with the timbre of voices that had once been afraid to speak. The melody rolled through the small space, weaving together grief and hope, loss and rebirth. It invited anyone listening to stand one more time, to sing even when their throat trembled, to believe that the end wasn't written yet. If this story reached you, share it. Pass the hope along. And if someone near you feels like they're slipping away, don't leave them in the dark. Sit close. Sing if you can. Sometimes that's enough to remind them they're not lost. Just not finished yet.